This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Joined today by Karen Waldrop. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Chief Conservation Officer with Ducks Unlimited, and more important to me, I'm joking about that, big time squirrel dog.
I am.
Squirrel hunting dog hunter.
Yes.
How do you say that?
So squirrel hunter with dogs?
Squirrel hunter with dogs. I like that. It's clean.
Yep, it's clean.
How'd you get into that?
Oh, goodness. It was in college, and I went out with a buddy one time and fell in love with it. And
Was the buddy a guy or a girl?
It was a guy.
Okay.
And it was, what I love about it is you can go out, it's like well after deer season and everything else is over, duck season. You can still go out until the end of February in most states.
Yeah, I should get a shirt that says it's usually squirrel season.
Oh my gosh, it's always squirrel season somewhere. You can get a spring squirrel season, fall, winter. It's great.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
You can normally go squirrel hunting.
You can normally go squirrel hunting.
So you got turned on to it, but that's like a whole commitment to get the dogs.
It is. Huh? Yeah, so I got into it right away. Got my first dog and
in college.
A treeing feist in college, and
really?
had her for 17 years, and she hunted hard for about 10.
That's who's on your phone?
She was awesome. That's who's on my phone still. It's terrible.
Really?
Not my kid, not my other dogs. A dog
Your
that's been dead.
My
dead dog is on my phone. Yeah.
Where'd you go to college?
Well, that's a long story, and
I'm just curious, like where you were at that made it plausible.
I was at University of Georgia at the time, but I started at Florida State. Went to University of Georgia, got my bachelor's and my master's there, and then went to Clemson University for my PhD, and then University of Kentucky for my postdoc.
See, oddly enough, your reaction was the same as a friend of mine who was asked not to return to college.
That's right. I did not leave
Very
college.
different endings there. Right? You really said.
We prefer if you didn't come back to college.
Yep. Didn't want to get a job, enter the real world, just stay in school.
But you were brought up in Kentucky.
Actually, I was brought up in Florida.
Oh,
But Kentucky's where we raised our family and was there for a long time. So, but I was
you're
born in
from
Mississippi.
Florida.
Yep, born in Mississippi, raised mostly in Florida.
I understand now.
North Central Florida.
But then you spent a lot of your career in Kentucky.
Yes. So actually, when I was working on my PhD at Clemson University, I was working on the elk restoration project for Kentucky. So we came out west, grabbed 1,500 elk from a bunch of western states and started a restoration program. And that's why I actually went to Clemson, was to study the elk restoration work in Kentucky. And so I went to Clemson for the professor and then did all my field work up there.
Did you know I later killed one of your elk?
Did you really? Yeah. What year did you come out?
Man, a long time ago.
I had to have still been there. I remember it now.
Yeah,
yep.
A long time ago. That was fun, man.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's not...
hunting elk in the hardwoods seems so weird, dude, to see an elk standing in hardwoods.
and let me tell you, it's steep.
Yeah.
Like, it's not forgiving country out. I mean, you're used to this out here, but East Kentucky can be pretty rough to hunt an elk in.
Yeah, you're hunting elk in hardwoods, and we were finding hen of the woods mushrooms.
Pretty fun.
No, super fun. So the reason I was asking about where to college. Yeah. So you would, as a college student, move around with that little squirrel dog.
I did. She actually we would camp out on reclaimed coal mines. So the elk came into East Kentucky because there's a lot of coal mining. So the reclaimed coal practices actually makes it really conducive for elk and elk habitat. So that's where the elk came into. Plus it's out of horse country, cattle, and everything else. So she would, when I was doing all my field work, I camped, lived in a tent for about 3 years, and it was me and my dog camping out in my tent for 3 years. And so since it's almost always squirrel season,
you just squirrel hunted your asses off.
I just squirrel hunted our asses off. We ate a lot of squirrel. She and I both.
You got new ones to replace the dead one?
Of course, I do. Yep.
How many you got now?
Well, I only have 2 right now, but I've had quite a few at any one time. But she was still probably the one that, is the bar, right? And all the others have to match up to it. I've got one right now. His name is Oakley. He's about 4 or 5 years old, and he had a good season last year, and this year is going to be it's gonna be knockout. He's a killer.
Oh, that's exciting. Good. You'll appreciate this. This is a listener feedback, but it has to do with Kentucky.
All right.
So you have some subject matter expertise. This guy in Kentucky writes in, and he was kind of underwhelmed. I can't tell. I would think he'd be happy, but he seems like he's not happy. I can't tell.
I think he gets happy at the end. He's just kind of like...
He's happy at the end. He took hunter safety, which and in Kentucky there's a field day requirement.
Yes.
It seems like there used to be not that, and then it kind of got a lot of field days, and then COVID happened, and it kind of got a lot less field days. But he had a field day in Kentucky, and he goes down there to do the field day, and in the end, what it amounts to is him waiting in line, and he goes 40 miles, starts at 9 a.m. He thought he'd be there till noon. When he gets there, they tell him to get in line. They give him some earplugs and some eye protection. They hand him a 22. He calls it a little pea shooter. They give him a single 22 long rifle round and a pea shooter, and he's supposed to put that round in the pea shooter, flip the safety, and shoot a target that's 10 yards downrange. Rack the bolt, and he's passed.
Yeah.
And he's wondering, is there more to it out west or less to it? It's not a west-east thing.
Not at all.
No, it's a state by state. Some states have made it state law where you don't have to have the field portion of it.
Yeah.
And in Kentucky, they've kept that, and it really depends on your instructor that you get. So your hunter ed instructor, some of them they'll bring out every different type of weapon and let you shoot them in muzzle loaders and shoot multiple times, and but then others, it's the requirement: can they safely shoot a pea shooter? Can they safely shoot a 22? Rack it, not pointed at anybody, put it back up safely, meet that check. So it just really depends on the instructor that you get.
I feel that they could safely do away with that safety part.
Yeah. And
the field day.
The field day. Well, if you think about it, a lot of them, that most people, not all, but most of them are either somebody that's a kid that's been hunting with mom and dad, uncle, grandparent, somebody for a long time before they come there, or it's, an adult that's getting into hunting, a young adult or older adult, and they've been going with their friends for several years, because you have in Kentucky and several other states where you can hunt if you're like an apprenticeship. So if you're hunting with somebody else, you can go out. So that's where they're getting their hunter safety training.
Exactly,
so they can probably pass that field part.
So to answer your question, no, it has nothing to do with west, east. He wondered if it has to do with that Kentucky's more flat.
No.
And it's not like difficult to traverse.
No.
But no, because in Idaho it's all online.
Yep.
Well, yeah, there's a big stir amongst the hunter education instructors, because this last 10 years has seen a lot of importance put on hunter's education, and then out of convenience and starting with a lot of the COVID protocols, you can just bypass hunter's ed basically entirely. Like Montana's a great example. We require hunter's education. We don't require Montana hunter education.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't want to get my kid down to a class. I don't want to take that time. Let's just hop online.
Kids in Montana have to take it, and they have to take it.
They don't.
No,
not Montana has education.
No, you can do. You don't. You
have
can do
to provide.
Other states.
But I'm saying if you live in Montana and your kid takes hunter ed here, they have to do a field day.
Yes, but they could bypass it by doing. Well, I don't want to give dirty secrets.
No,
there's some
you
ways.
can bypass it by having your kid do a different state online, and Montana accepts it.
That's right.
Online, Texas, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so
versus all that hassle.
Well, but also a lot of people say it's a barrier, right?
Yeah,
they say it's a barrier to get
barriers.
people into hunting, and so making it easy where you don't have that field day. But
if your kid does the 2-year mentor program, that's 2 years of field time.
If he's got a good mentor.
Right.
Okay, but the mentor has to be someone 21.
Yeah. Or is it 21 or 18?
18.
Is it
I think
18?
it might be.
So the mentor's got to be of good standing, licensed, and 18. I'm saying because
They haven't been
they
caught
could
yet
never
doing
go
something
out. But if you
stupid.
go out and do a lot of field time and it's a lot of exposure, that's going to supersede what.
Yeah, but
It's very. I get very impassioned about this subject.
Well, yeah, but it's like, this is not specifically saying, Stephen Ranelli, you don't know how to teach your kids.
No, my kid did
in the
Montana.
way that,
Yeah.
right? But every year we also have this big other to-do of like, oh my gosh, the people who misbehave while hunting are jeopardizing all these awesome programs that provide opportunity for hunting.
Yeah.
It must be our hunter's education program that is failing. And it's like, well,
I don't think
nobody
we should
has to take the hunter's education program.
I
So
don't
why
think
are
they
we
should
going
be
to beef
looking
up
to
that?
get out of field days. It's like getting a driver's license without taking a driving test. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what burns my
And you
ass.
shouldn't be able to get a driver's license if you just drive with someone who's 18 in the car for a couple years.
Give it a try.
Yeah, he's been driving.
He's been watching his dad drive for years.
I did hunter's education in Missoula, and like the Missoula hunters or the fish and game facility out there is big out on Spurgeon Road, and so that's where they did the field course out there, and they had I failed one portion of it because they had adults that would come up to you and be like, "Hey, can I see your gun?"
Oh, Lil.
And you're like, "Yeah."
Like secret shopper kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, "Well, you shouldn't just let anybody come up and," and you're like, "Whoa!" It was
trap.
Yeah, it was brutal. But yeah, they had because there was like, it's relatively hilly, so they were like, how do you carry your gun in this situation? Stuff like that. And it's like absolutely not mistakes that I don't see adults making. And I don't every single season say, hey, point it this way, to adults.
I did my hunter's ed in Ohio, and it was actually like a very substantive class. We had to drive a long way to do it. But then at the end of it, I got the card, and it was written on like in pen, just on like the card. It said Randall Williams and whatever date. And probably a year after I did that, the date and my name had rubbed off the card.
Oh, no.
Nice.
And I don't know if there's any other record of it, so I rewrote my name and tried to remember.
That doesn't look
tried to
fraudulent
remember the
at all,
dates.
yeah.
And so now, whenever I buy a license online, like in Idaho or something, and it's like enter the state where you took it and what dates, and if you have an ID number, and I'm like, oh, I hope they don't catch me because I'm just sort of making this up based on my my clearest recollection of being 17 years old. And
Well, if you want to have more dirty secrets out there, there's no standardization for hunter's education. So if you type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what I feel like I'm doing.
That's a
even
great
though
point, man.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Because
Yeah.
the numbers are so like, what?
Right. Because
It
like
doesn't check
Montana's numbers, right? It starts with like a letter and then the date and yeah.
It's not like a social security
right.
number.
If you go to California, it's completely different.
It's odd that Cal, with no children, has such an in-depth knowledge of
It does. Yeah.
not just knowledge, but opinions about hunter safety programs.
Well, because
this is just a concerned citizen.
I participate in the program. People want to
Because he's like, it's one of these people that's going to shoot me someday.
yeah, exactly. Or it's like the giant pile of human feces and toilet paper next to the sign-in box at block management, right? It's like
that's just someone on their way to work.
right. We're
You
not.
have no proof that's a hunter.
Like my big chip on my shoulder is I feel if you're an hunter's education instructor out there, you are doing the Lord's work. Absolutely. You're taking a lot of time for those children who have parents that are willing to get them to those classes to make better first-time hunters out there. And I think it's incredibly important. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the people out there making mistakes are ones that are just, they're not paying attention to the Fish and Game website. They're not reading the regulations. They're not, it's like we need to find a completely different mechanism to reach out and educate these people because they're not tapped into the traditional information lines.
But I think if you take those hunter safety courses, and you maybe have fewer of them, and you take those best instructors and you make it where, okay, so if you're not somebody, a 12-year-old that's 13-year-old's been hunting with dad a whole bunch and knows everything really well, then maybe you can kind of opt out by taking a test or different things, but make it to where it's more than just going out driving, for a couple hours and shooting a 22. Like, make it fun, make it interactive, make it educational to where somebody doesn't feel like they just wasted their time.
Yeah,
so,
if there's a driving portion, there should be a deer on the side of the road.
Right?
On the way there.
Yeah,
and your
you need
instructor
that.
jams on the brakes,
Right?
skids sideways on the dirt road, and goes, "What do you do?"
See, interactive and fun.
Yes.
I like it.
Oh, you know what was making me nervous yesterday is speaking of gun handling, and I had no problems, but I took my kid who's a freshman in high school and his high school buddy. We went out in layout blinds.
Yeah.
That was stressing me
Yeah.
out. Because we had a guy on the podcast one time that blew the middle toes out of his foot in a layout blind.
I had a guy not long ago that was hunting with us that shot the end of somebody else's barrel in the layout because they didn't keep with that,
Yeah, it's
10 to 2,
like
shot the end of the barrel.
that was stressing me out, man.
Yeah, it would stress
No
me.
one did anything dumb, but it's just a lot going on.
Well,
Yeah.
You're like, okay, like you're gonna burst out of this box.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we had.
I have no idea where anything is and burst out of this box and start shooting. But
yeah, don't shoot the dogs. Don't shoot,
right,
shoot
and
low.
that's layout blinds are they're stressful for sure. But we just hunted with a big group of folks, and on day 3, one of them finally spoke up and was like, "Now, what do you mean by shooting lanes?"
Oh, geez.
Right? And adult men, it takes time
yeah,
to be like, oh, okay, this is a safe group to ask questions.
yeah.
He's like, so let's say there's a duck all the way down here. You don't shoot. I'm like, there's 5 other hunters down there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
That-
interesting how you people do this.
I've been working on that trait of men, where now when someone tells me something, and they go, you know what I mean? I'll say, I don't know what you mean. Or they'll use like a technical term about something, like with a vehicle that I'm not tuned
And
in
you
on.
say,
And I'll say like, I'll be like, explain the
Acronym.
turbo in your
right.
the
Actually, I
turbo.
don't know what that means.
And I'll be like, right? And normally you go like, oh, yeah, right on. I'll just say, I don't understand, but that's fine.
I don't think that's.
I'm not putting it on you,
Yeah,
That's not
but I'm not going to tell you I
Right.
understand.
I
It's
think people do that, but I can. Yeah.
it's a very male thing to do, especially talking about vehicles.
Guys, just own up to your lack of knowledge.
Yeah. Although I got over it when I working construction and working like with a Finnish carpenter, and he would just ask me something. He'd be like, "Get me this," and it was like the first week I would do 3 trips and get him the wrong thing the first 2 times, and then the third time and bring him what he wants, and then all of a sudden it was just like, I'm going to save myself and save him a lot of frustration and anxiety if I just clarify things right off the bat.
Sure. I'll say this about hunting with kids and layout blinds. Like at that age, their reflexes are so freaking fast, man.
Yeah.
They'd shoot the geese before I could get my box open. I'm like, how are they so fast? And I'm like getting so slow. Man, they're fast. They're just like wired fast. We're gonna do one more bit of feedback.
That's fine.
Can you hang
Sounds
tight a
good.
minute?
Yeah.
Oh, plus there's this.
This is fun.
Randall this morning. He comes in all. We found over the weekend the greatest free range Christmas tree ever found by man.
Nice.
And by we, he means his family.
My family. The greatest free range tree.
Mine did not.
And Randall,
Pass judgment.
He's like talking about, I got a real booner. Tell me all about where he went, how snowy it was, and how rugged it was, and he shows me a tree, and he tries to sell me on the fact that only like half the tree's there.
Because that's
It's like
goes
one of those
against the
trees that
wall.
was nestled up to his neighbor.
I think
so. It didn't grow any limbs on that side, and look, it just put it right against the wall. It comes with a flat side. It comes with a flat side.
You know what I don't
have a
like doing
corner.
is decorating the backside of a tree.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to.
If I
now.
want to look at
That
all
is
my ornaments, I like
perfect.
my trees to have sort of a
flat wall in the
fade.
back.
He got
fade
himself
to
a
black.
non-typical.
Yeah,
Maybe he's
not
onto
typical.
something.
It had a weak left side.
it
right?
doesn't stick out into the room as far.
Yeah.
It goes right up against the wall, and you
That's
don't have to
smart.
waste your precious ornaments on the back
That's
end of
On
it.
your way up, were you telling your wife, like, what we're looking for is
Well, what
a half tree?
do you rotate your tree every few days
No,
in the
I
month of
trim
December
that.
so you can
No.
appreciate all
I
sides of it?
trim that. I flush that backside up with a shear, but I don't look for one.
Oh.
I
See,
don't
that's
look for
extra
one
work.
with
So
it.
mine,
Well, Randall's permit was for a management tree.
mine didn't require modification.
I think he's onto something.
I
I
know,
think
for
it's going to be
sure.
like the new thing. Everyone's going to be trying to grow
You don't
these
have
flat
a tree in the
trees.
center
Totally.
of the room. That's great.
Especially, if we had a smaller house, I'd want one that fits into a corner. Just a right angle, two flat sides, just slide it right in there.
Well, if you think about it, the ornaments you put on the back are all the ones that, the kids might have made or that, well, actually, those for me go on the front.
Other
Sorry,
people's
kids.
kids.
Yeah.
Other people's kids, right?
Sit
Or
right
just
in the
like the really old, crappy ones. You put those all in the back so you
We-
see all the
We
pretty
haven't
ones.
accumulated yet enough ornaments
Yeah.
as a family to
You can have some ours. We
have
got
some
plenty of-
castaways.
Yes.
Yeah, I know a way to fix that in a hurry. And all you gotta do is stop trying to make it not happen, which is having children. Last piece of listener feedback. This is a good one. This fella says this. His name's Logan. I recently ran into an issue with a new neighbor hunting the property next to the one I have permission to hunt. Says everything around here is privately owned land. He's clarifying that. While I generally try to stay on good terms with the folks around me, this new neighbor decided to place a trail camera on the fence line facing the property I hunt. I'm sure that the only reason for doing so is to monitor the deer activity on my side of the fence. Well, you remember that Robert Frost? He was the poet laureate.
Mm-hmm.
He had
Fences.
that fences
Good
about the two
fences.
neighbors that get together every year to reinforce the fence between their properties.
Mm-hmm.
Good fences make good neighbors. But he's kind of dogging on them.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I normally wouldn't care who puts cameras where, but the fact that it's placed less than 5 yards from the fence and pointed directly on the trail I use to get in and out of my bow stand really bothers me. He's wondering, should he moon the camera? Should he give it the camera the finger? Or should he get a big taxidermy deer and start jutting it out in front of the camera now and then to create the illusion of a giant buck in the area that isn't actually there?
I personally like option 3, but
It's funny.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of
Oh,
a
you
prankster.
left out. You left out.
Lastly,
Or
Oh.
he might grab his own camera and point it back at that camera.
That's what I'd do.
yeah.
I would hold all those and I would say to the guy, maybe say to the neighbor, do you mind not aiming your camera? Do you mind not aiming your camera like deliberately onto my place? Because I walk through there and it bothers me. I remember Doug Dern, they had a place out there and there's a neighbor had this wood lot and there's this huge sign painted on plywood that said, oh, do not shoot into these woods. And Doug wanted to put one on his side that said, do not shoot out of these woods.
That's good. Can he,
Doug's place is, man, if you climb up just about any tree stand and look hard enough, you can find a little bit of orange sticking out of somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
You're like, whoa, it's crazy. And some stone-faced people out there too. Like they're like, nope, you don't exist. I'm just looking at the 25 yards between me and you, and that's it. It's wild.
Another thing this guy could do is put a tarp up.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I
Build
was
a
thinking.
brush
A
pile right in
privacy,
front of
like
that
a
camera.
privacy screen. Yeah, that would bug the hell out of me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would definitely call for sure. But, there's always something good that you're going to get out of a conversation with the neighbor. But, yeah, all the funny things that you could do would be awesome. Just, have a little screen that you put up there and have like a deer,
Oh,
you know.
Have something that'll trigger the camera every 5 seconds.
Yeah, a little
CD.
windmill.
Oh, that'd be good.
A
Just
little
something that just
windmill.
gives him like
Yeah.
so much noise that he'll never get through it to find you walking around.
Kills the battery within
So when he
2
pulls
days.
his card, it's like you have 3,000 images, you know?
Just a CD spinning out of a truck.
Yeah.
Here's what we're not going to talk about. Because this happens, people do this all the time. Some hosers in where? Netherlands? Where are this at?
Sorry, one thing. That buddy of mine that we were talking about the other day, he's got all the grizzly bears and wolves and stuff on his camera. You know, things that just set cameras off. This is an observation that I made. He's like, yeah, this camera, this squirrel keeps setting it off. And he starts like going through and through and through. See him there? 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 And eventually it dawned on me. I'm like, you know, this squirrel's giving this guy a lot of enjoyment.
Yeah.
You know? Netherlands. Sorry.
The authors are from Germany.
Wait, I don't
and
care where
the-
they're
I
from.
believe
Where's
you left
the
off with
research about?
hosers in the Netherlands.
And the editors from Colombia. The research is based in Germany.
Okay, so these hosers in Germany have determined they've done a map where they look at the more wolf attacks there are in an area, the more the area's prone to vote right wing.
Far right.
Yeah. far
Aren't
right.
you kind of saying rural people tend to vote far right? Because Ian Fraser did the same thing in the U.S., where he's like, the more wild hogs are in the area, the more you're likely to vote Republican. But every election you prove this over and over again, that generally, I mean, there's many, many exceptions, but generally, rural areas generally vote right. Urban areas, this is generally true. Urban areas generally vote left. So I feel like you're just finding new ways to say the same thing. It'd be like, the further apart houses are,
The more pickup trucks there are in an area.
The more squirrel hunters.
This is based
in the
on
area.
livestock attacks too, right? Not human.
no, yeah. But I'm just saying, it's like another way of it's another way of expressing. Like I'm guessing that wolves attacking livestock is happening in rural agricultural areas in Germany. And those people are voting different than people that are in Munich. So great work, guys.
Well, maybe they're having trouble identifying rural areas. So they found a new
So like,
indicator.
what would be the epitome of ruralness? And some guy's like, I guess it'd be like a fucking wolf attacking a cow. That feels rural to me. All right, Karen. How are ducks doing in general in the
Hi.
United States of America?
Yeah. So our North American waterfowl population is, so I don't know if you guys follow, when U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at Ducks Unlimited, it's a big day when the breeding population survey and habitat survey comes out. It's always a fun day to see
I bet
what
Cal
the
reads
numbers
it.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big day, right? You look for that every year. It's kind of like Christmas. But so what we saw for this year, I mean, numbers are still down, but they came up. So for the first time in 10 years, waterfowl populations went up about 5%.
Okay.
So of course that's going to be, a lot of that's going to be dependent on the pond surveys too. And there was a lot of difference in pond surveys in the Prairie Pothole region. And I'm sure all the listeners know that or understand that waterfowl, for waterfowl, for breeding, the Prairie Potholes is like 60% of waterfowl nests there. And then a lot, 25, 30% or so in the boreal. And in wet years, you have a lot more in the prairies, of U.S. and Canada. And so the
Can
surveys.
you tell people basically what you're talking about when you talk about the prairie potholes?
Yeah, so the prairie potholes are going to be, in southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and then into the U.S. prairies of North Dakota, Montana, the eastern part, north of Montana, the northern and eastern part of North Dakota, eastern part of South Dakota, and goes down into Minnesota and a little bit into Iowa, but most of the wetlands are gone there. But that's the prairie pothole region, and it is a critical landscape for waterfowl and for Ducks Unlimited and other waterfowl enthusiasts. It's like the priority landscape for federal and state partners as well. But so what we're seeing this past year with pond counts is it's a pretty diverse and dynamic landscape. So the U.S. prairie potholes were wetter than they've been in the last 10 years. So they actually had a big increase, like a 50% increase from last year. But then the prairies in Canada were the driest they've been in 30 years. And so just shows that dynamic landscape, and they were down. So overall, the pond counts was like 4% higher than last year, right around the long-term average for pond counts. And so you take those two things, and that's how the seasons are determined as far as how the population's doing. Well, for the central Mississippi flyways, you look at the pond counts and then the mallard population, and that determines what the seasons are going to be. So we look at that every year to look at what the seasons are going to be for the following year. So waterfowl populations, there's a little bit of good news. Mother Nature's been helping us out a little bit. It's still, we've been in a long-term drought. It's going to take years of good weather at the right time, right amount of moisture, cold up north, get a lot of snow cover, and then some good rains to keep that going. But potholes, it's a normal cycle. Like we have, every however many years, 30 years, whatever it might be. Remember the 80s were really bad, but droughts are important for wetlands to recharge themselves. So while we don't like it as waterfowl hunters, and it makes us nervous, we should be coming out of that drought cycle and hopefully seeing some increased populations. But we'll see. The problem with the only problem with when the water came in the prairies in the U.S., it was after a lot of those early migrants came through. So a lot of your mallards and everything, so they flew over because it was dry, and they went to the boreal, which it's great. The boreal landscape is kind of like, it is good to have that because it does provide a lot of nesting and production opportunities, but typically waterfowl don't produce as well up there. So the reproduction's not as well because the habitat's not as rich in invertebrates and everything that they need for laying eggs, and it's just not as productive of a habitat for waterfowl. But it's pretty darn good, and it's vast, so it's good to have. But typically what we see a lot when waterfowl fly over the prairies is not as many young birds in the bag as far as the ratio of juveniles to adults in the survey, in the harvest information reports and everything else. That it's not usually, that ratio is not as many young birds. But we were seeing from biologists were saying that those birds that did stay in the prairies or that came later, man, they had great habitat. So we should have really good production, and they were actually seeing that, a lot of young birds coming out of the U.S. prairie potholes. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. Is it that if a duck's coming from, he goes south for the winter, and he's flying up, he's not like a salmon where he doesn't know exactly where he's going.
Well, I don't know. They have done studies, of course, transmitters, and showing birds coming back like so close to where they had been previous years, right?
But you said they would shoot past.
Oh yeah, if there's no water, they'll shoot past, and find another place. Yeah.
Got it. So they want to kind of go where they came from.
They want to go where they come from. So
yeah,
it's pretty neat.
It is.
There's actually, just to do a plug for it, the movie Wings Over Water. I don't know if you've heard of it yet. Yep. It's been out a couple years. It's an IMAX. It's really geared towards kids. So, but not just kids, but it's talking about the prairie potholes, and it's not just waterfowl. It follows a duck, follows a sandhill crane, and a yellow warbler, and shows their migration from south all the way up to the prairies and the importance of prairies and all the landowners there and farmers and ranchers and why the prairie pothole region is so important for all sorts of species of birds.
What's the major thing besides that water level? What's the major thing that drives duck up and down, drives duck numbers up and down in the United States?
So, I mean, habitat, right? So, it's all tied to habitat, and pond count is a good way. Of course, it's been going on since the mid 1950s, and it's the longest running waterfowl population survey. It was missed 2 years because of COVID, but other than that, longest survey. And so, it's a good indicator. The more wetlands that are on a landscape, which is what waterfowl need in the grasslands, surrounding grasslands. So for nesting and everything as well, and then for brood production and brood rearing. But the more wetlands and smaller, shallow wetlands are preferred over, I'd rather have 100, 1 acre wetlands than 100 acre wetland because they're very territorial as well. So the more water you have on the landscape from wetlands, the better production you're going to have for waterfowl. And it follows it pretty closely. You can see waterfowl populations up and down, and it being with, the previous year's wetland production.
Got it.
So wetland conservation, Ducks Unlimited, that's what it's all about. And, our priority landscape, of course, is the prairies. That's our number one priority landscape. We work all throughout North America. We have a lot of landscape conservation priority areas that are important for waterfowl because wintering habitat is really important for waterfowl too. You have to get those, you have to have enough energy and carbohydrates and everything that they need for fat storage and everything else to make it through those cold winters and be able to come back up north.
But now that you hear about people say like changing agricultural practices will really impact.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. So there's a study we actually just finished using band return. So from the 1960s until 2019, one of our biologists, Dr. Mike Brazier, along with Dr. Webb with the Missouri co-op unit, and then also U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, looked at bands from 1960 to 2019, and we looked at 3 different species of birds: mallard, pintail, and blue-winged teal, and then looked at different subpopulations of where they came from, whether it was Canada and the boreal, Canadian prairies and the boreal, U.S. prairies, and then the Great Lakes and eastern Canada, and then looked at different months: October, November, December, January. So getting to your point. So pintails, if you looked in 1960s, pintails were all along the coast in the winter. Rice in Texas was big. So all those pintails in January in the 1960s and 70s were all there. Now, in 2019 and 10s to 19s, that population shifted. You could see in January bird band returns to Arkansas, the Mississippi Alluvial Valley, where the rice is. So
What?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's all, you can check it out. We've got it's on our website, but part of that study was actually in the last magazine too. It's really neat. So looking at those,
So they just found the
pintail.
rice production, and now that all that rice is down in Texas and Louisiana
on
and
the
stuff.
coast.
Yeah.
Yep. Still a lot.
Yeah, the
Louisiana, but-
Californians are
California
super
love
happy
rice.
because they can shoot 2 pintails a day.
No,
now
no,
in
no.
right?
No. It's 1 right now. But
Oh, I
next
thought it
year,
is switching.
next year it'll be 3.
Oh,
And
okay.
both the Mississippi, Central, Atlantic, all 4 flyways will be at 3 next year, not this current year. I have to be really careful.
What happens?
That lady
why
on Ducks
why is it
Unlimited.
going up?
So, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, again, okay, there's adaptive harvest management models for all sorts of different species, and we could spend a lot of time going into it. It's really cool. We could geek out in the science of it. But, pintails, like you said, Pacific Flyway, they're seeing so many pintails. Well, the thing is, they get their pintails not only from Alaska, but also from the Canadian prairies and U.S. prairies, and where those pintails aren't doing as well.
We have a lot of
you know.
pintails in Montana in the spring.
It's
It's super cool.
Heck yeah, you do. You should. And so what it is, they mix, whereas mallards, they have, the mid-continent mallards, the western mallards, eastern mallards, they stay in their flyways. Pintails, it's a little bit different. So they've been restricted to 1. But the reason for looking at it is it's an experimental 3, I don't know if they're calling it quote-unquote experimental season, but it's a 3-year trial season. And if the numbers don't drop below, I might get this a little wrong, let's say I think it's 1.2 million, that will be open for 3 birds. If it gets below that, it'll drop to 2, 1, or closed season, depending on where that population is. And so this year, from the breeding population survey, it's over the 1.2 million mark, or whatever that is. It's around there. But the reason they're doing this is they're trying to really see what are the effects. Is there an effect of shooting 3 pintails on the population? We try to set our populations. We, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Ducks Unlimited is not part of it. I should make that clear. But U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and bioscientists try to make sure that you're not having the additive impact of mortality in hunting. So what they want to see is there an impact from harvesting 3 birds on that population, or is it not additive? Is it compensatory, that hunter harvest?
Do you mind walking people through what that means?
Good job, Steve.
Additive, just so people understand additive and compensatory.
Yep. So if it's additive mortality, those birds would have made it back to nesting and had a successful nesting and had more production the following year. If it's additive from that harvest, and if it's compensatory, then it's those birds wouldn't have made it anyway. A certain number of birds aren't going to make it back to breed because of their life cycle.
Got it.
And that's like when I go love hunting in California, and you do see, it seems very consistent that you see more pintails than anything else. And so, of course, you get more complaints about only being able to kill one pintail per day.
They're just flying over you, just sitting there flying over you.
Yeah.
And they're myth because what's going on is that all those Sacramento rice field pintails are all hanging out in Arkansas now?
No.
Oh.
This is different flyway. So,
I thought you were saying they shifted over. What the hell are you talking about?
What the hell are you talking about, lady? So the birds coming from the Canadian U.S. prairies, some of them will go down to Arkansas, some of them will head over to California. And so it's not distinct where they come from. So in other words, the birds, the pintails in the U.S. and the Canadian prairies aren't doing as well. The ones up in Alaska are doing well, but they all come down into California. But some of these from Canada
So the Alaska ones aren't going to Arkansas.
Correct.
I understand now. Okay.
Yep.
But you always have to tell those California folks, it's like, well, they're not California pintails. They're kind of everybody's pintails. And me in Montana, I can shoot one per day, and we're growing them. They just end up here.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the thing about waterfowl. It's pretty impressive to understand how U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the states, because they have part of that through the Flyway Councils. And when I was in Kentucky, I was on the Mississippi Flyway Council, and manage waterfowl populations for everybody because they are a migratory species. And, the amount of time and effort that it takes to determine the models that are going to be best for those waterfowl populations to sustain them and to not cause harm to those populations. It's a pretty important job that the service does, and that survey is critical, and one of the reasons why we can make it happen, and also hunters, right? With your harvest information program, doing the HIP survey every year, answering the U.S. Fish and Wildlife surveys, all of those things are critical to help manage that population of birds.
Have you ever done an honesty check on the HIP survey? Has anybody ever done that?
Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah. So.
I give it straight on mine.
Right. So here's
but
the
I can see someone being like, wow, shit, I must have got 40 of those.
Yeah. Like, do you want to, you've got some hunters that, I don't want to tell everybody that I'm killing a whole bunch of birds,
So they put down zero. Right? So you get other guys that want to look like they get more than they're getting.
But here's the thing about it. If we don't have the correct survey information, then, we're not doing our part as hunters, right? That science part of it. So what was happening in Kentucky, I'll give this example. We had some of the worst HIP survey data results because what was happening, we think, is everyone was going to the Walmart to do their HIP to buy their license, right? I'm just saying Walmart, sorry. Any hunting store to go buy their license. And
I've bought more than a few at Walmart.
Right? Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't want to pick on Walmart, right? It could be any
place. It's a great place to buy a license.
Yeah, so it is a great place. Walmart's great.
Yeah, but, get your sliced deli meat, your AA batteries,
some deodorant, pick up a hunt license.
I just didn't want to say it was
DVDs.
Walmart
Oil.
employees were not doing a good job.
Yeah.
So, but got the 18-year-old behind the counter that's selling the license, and they get to the HIP survey and they just go 00000. Here's your license, right? And they don't ask them, are you a waterfowl hunter? Are you a migrant? Are you a dove hunter? Are you this? Are you that? They don't ask them. They just go blah, blah, blah. And so then
he's just trying to
you
get
don't know as the
of.
hunter that you're not complying with the law and you're not doing it right. You're thinking, everything's fine. You get your license. Well, so our data in Kentucky was terrible. So what we did is we instituted, it was a law that you had to go online. You could no longer at point of sale, even if you bought your license point of sale, you had to go online and do your HIP survey. And so then our data went from one of the worst in the country to one of the best that we were providing the service to help
how
manage.
do you know it's good or bad?
So there are ways you can fact check year after year after year of like certain hunters, to see if it's pretty normal. Oh, they killed 20 birds here and 0 here and 20 there. So you can kind of see.
Still not killing any birds.
Yeah. Well, that poor Randall.
Looks like Randall didn't get
He
out
tries
again.
real hard though, doesn't he? Yeah.
Every year they goof on Randall. Let's all have a laugh, pull up Randall's survey.
Poor Randall.
I got a question on the HIP surveys.
Mm-hmm.
So last year would be a good example, I guess, or still this year, I guess, but hunted Missouri, hunted
Ah.
California.
Yep. Got to do it twice.
You got to do it twice.
Yep. And that's another thing people don't know. It's an education
Shit, I
thing.
didn't know that.
Is the
Yeah.
expectation that it doesn't matter where you are, you're filling out the number of birds that you got in aggregate.
There. In that location. No, in that
Or is
in
it
that state.
That's what
specific
it
to
is?
that
Yeah.
state.
Yep.
God, I've been getting bad.
If you need a
now.
takeaway,
Yeah,
folks.
you might have to retract that statement earlier about always filling out your hip survey
Yeah.
Well,
accurately.
Well, my intentions were pure.
when you buy well, so it should be if you
Have
buy at
to
point of
have
sale, they should ask you.
But I didn't know they were
did you
asking
hunt here
about
last
that.
year?
But you know what? I don't often go somewhere. I didn't know that. Like I didn't know
Right.
if you go to Alaska and hunt for a
No,
day.
every time you
Yeah.
buy
But
you
I
gotta
thought it
do
meant
it.
all in. Whatever you've been up to.
Oh,
Yeah, collectively, right? Yeah.
It's not all in.
Mm-mm. No, because they'll take it state by state and roll it all up.
That's not clear. They should fix
Yeah.
that.
They should definitely
Well,
clear that
you know, we
up,
are
man.
trying
What's
to-
HIP stand for anyway?
Harvest Information Program.
Okay.
And so
Hipster.
we're actually trying to help the state fish and wildlife agencies and trying to collect the most accurate data, working
Yep.
with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in order to do that. But it's interesting.
Oh, what was your question about? Oh,
No, that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it. It's like, are you filling it out for your harvest information in that specific state?
yep.
Or are you saying, this is me. This is what I did last year.
Yeah, you might
wherever I am."
later today. You might send an email to the higher ups in the HIP program and tell them that they should clarify that point.
And it would create incredible efficiency. Did you hunt Missouri last year? Nope. Okay. 00000.
Yep. And so then, of course, if you just go there 1 year and hunt, and you don't go back for a couple of years, right? So then you're not collecting whatever. But they've got all sorts of data management behind the scenes to figure out things like that. So they work through those things. It's a pretty good system, but they are working on improvements to the Harvest Information Program so we can collect the best survey data possible.
Let's say you're a hunter. We can move on from the HIP survey because I don't think.
Well,
this
I
is
want to
the-
know who kills the most snipe. Because that's always on
Always
the
on there,
go.
right?
when I
me.
lived out in Seattle, I was hitting big snipe numbers. Those good pintails and good snipe. Now, for those years, I really liked it because I could get in there. Because normally you got to just skip through all the coots and rails and snipes. You're always like, do I really just got to go 0, 0, 0, 0? But I got to hit some snipes.
That's pretty cool.
Felt good, man. Yeah.
The kid at Walmart was duly impressed.
Back up. Put me down for 3.
Snipe.
Put me down
Not
for
so
3.
fast.
Put me down. And then, I should also mention, so when you do that HIP stuff, so that just puts you in a category. So that puts Randall will be in the 0 to
Zero,
whatever
zero, zero.
category. You would be in the max category, right?
Yeah.
I was pointing to Steve, by the way, everybody. Brownie points. But so once they do that, then they select a certain number of people from that grouping, and then they send out the more intricate survey. So the individual one doesn't really matter as much. That puts you in a group, and then that's when you get that big survey. And they made it online last year. It used to
Man,
always
I
be
got
paper.
for years.
Yeah.
I got roped into that.
Yep.
All the wings and
And so then that's when they ask you
I
the
came to
billion
really
questions.
resent those people. I was into it for a year or two, but
Right.
after a while, I was like, "Good Lord, man!"
Yeah. Yep. And so they'll figure out, like, they'll ask you which states did you hunt in, so you'll get
Yeah,
that
how do they
information
get? How do you
that
get
way.
picked for that? That got to be a lot.
Yeah, so it's a random. It should be a random generated in each of those categories, but they don't have as many in that top end category that you find yourself in. So
Well, no, I was
you get
in. I
hit
mean,
a lot more.
The elite snipe.
To be
The elite
totally
snipe
honest
group.
with you,
Snipe.
I do a lot of like, my geese numbers. I'm usually in the 0 to 10er.
Right.
Ducks. I get.
It's
I'll
random.
climb up into the 20 to 30 now and then. But I'm not a
Yep.
big waterfowl guy.
Yeah, no, it's a
I,
water.
enjoy, I appreciate it, but here's a waterfowl management question
All right.
to move away from HIP surveys. People will point out, like, I think it's widely understood that there's some kind of arrangement between states and federal, right? You can be duck hunting, you can get checked by a fed, but feds don't check you when you're deer hunting. But there's also like this, there's like an international component.
That's right.
But does that have any teeth? Or first, can you explain, like, what is the international component? And then does it have any teeth? Like, meaning, would Mexico ever be like, damn it, we're not getting any ducks down here. You need to change your bag limits.
Yeah.
Or would we just be like, mind your own business? Like, what would our attitude be?
Yeah, so the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, and it takes Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. Now, this is from a habitat standpoint, right? The NAWAMP, or North American Waterfowl Management Plan, and try to identify what are those most important places for habitat and structuring it that way. But then from an enforcement, so all three have their own regulations and laws and how they set that up.
And they don't cooperate on those laws.
No, and so if you think about it, in Canada, everyone's like, man, how come you can shoot so many up in Canada, but when they cross that line and into the United States, you can't?
How many can you shoot in Canada?
I'm trying to think of what the...
is there anything, we're at 7 right now in Montana. Is there anything more than 7 in Canada?
Yes, absolutely.
More than 7?
Yep.
On ducks?
So it's 8, I think, in Saskatchewan.
And do they have the 3-day possession limit?
That. I'm trying to think of what their possession limits are in Canada. I'm not sure. We need to look it up.
But there's an 8-bird limit there.
Yeah, I think it's an 8-bird limit.
You don't like that?
Saskatchewan. No, I'm trying to think of what it is. But you can harvest more birds in Canada, but there aren't as many hunters up there. So you have a lot more waterfowl hunters in the United States, so we're going to have a much higher impact. Same with Mexico. Not nearly as many waterfowl hunters in Mexico, so their daily bag limits can be higher in Canada and Mexico.
Because the pie is not getting cut up into as many pieces.
So this is the AI overview.
I'm sure it's right.
I'm not sure if it's right, but 8 per day.
Yeah.
This is
right,
ducks.
I was right.
With 4 being pintails.
Ooh. Take that, California.
Dart geese, 8 per day, with no more than 5 being white-fronted.
Wow. So that's double our geese.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot. White geese, 20 per day.
Not as much pressure.
It's fairly close.
And a much shorter amount of time, too,
5 sandhill cranes per day. That's a lot of meat.
Is white geese
Snows, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
normally lately when people say they're moving to Canada, they're making some kind of bitchy comment about the election, but you'd be like, no, I mean because ducks.
Well, I was going to say, this might make some of those Californians make good on their promises.
Giant mule deer and ducks? Come on.
Can't go wrong.
No.
How is it that how does it come to be that different states have different regs?
Okay.
How do they weigh that out?
Sure.
We're, like I said, right here, I don't know what it is in other places. Right now, I mean, for years it's been there's all kinds of restrictions, but you're allowed 7 ducks, and then we have all of those no more than blank. So 7 ducks, but no more than 2 can be a hen mallard. No more than on a pintail.
Yeah, well, there can be huge discrepancies. I remember a season or 2 where you could kill 7 ducks in Montana, but if you were in Stuttgart, Arkansas, the waterfowl capital of the world, you could shoot a duck.
A duck?
A duck.
A duck?
Yeah, that's how, I can't remember the exact situation, but it was very,
one duck?
Very
one
dire
greenhead?
over there. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, how is that all divided up?
So I mentioned briefly earlier the flyway councils. And so because they are migratory and international and everything, you have the federal regulations, and then you also can have state regulations. So whatever the feds come up with you can have next year 3 pintails and you're in the liberal season. States can be more restrictive than the federal rule, but not less restrictive. So a state like Arkansas can make the decision because they have a ton of hunters there putting a lot of pressure. They can be more restrictive, trying to keep more ducks in that area. But then there's also packages that come with the liberal package, and you can have a certain number of zones and splits in your season and everything. But there are federal regulations of if you have 1 split and 2 zones, it can only be this and that. So that in each area, and each flyway is different, and I don't know them all. But so it is a state and federal, and the Flyway Council has 1 state representative one representative from each state on the Mississippi Flyway, Atlantic, all the flyways, and they serve as a vote for, we as a flyway, do we agree with these particular regulations for our flyway? And then that goes up and goes back to the feds, and it finishes that system. But then a state can take what was in the Federal Register, and then they can make the decision to, take their packages however they want to and be more restrictive.
So Arkansas could come home from that meeting and they were pushing for greater restrictions. Didn't get them, but they can come home and just impose greater restrictions at home.
It's their commissioners or their board, however they're set up, that vote on their regulations. Each state, again, is different how the regulations are set. Some might be from a legislative set. Some might be from a Fish and Wildlife Commission. And so they vote. They take typically what you want system to work correctly is the biologist, the waterfowl biologist will give the recommendation to that board and say, look, this is what we think because our green tree reservoirs aren't doing well, or this or that, whatever reason they might have had. I don't know that situation, and we think this is our recommendation. But sometimes the commissions will make their own decision, and it'll be contrary sometimes to what the biologists think, to err on the side of caution or something.
Man, what were the conversations in Arkansas when it got as bad as one duck a year? People had to been like just complaining.
Yeah, because it's a big duck hunting is very social compared to a lot of other hunting activities, right? So a lot of folks getting together in blinds and you can only shoot
duck camps.
Yeah, I think that was where you really saw the rise of, like cooking and accoutrement in fancy duck blinds because you had to make more of a day out of it
because it wasn't just all shooting anymore.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And then and then we saw, then you see like your duck hunters that really want to keep hunting ducks, see them traveling a lot more when their home water restrictions get tighter, and they're searching out those liberal regulations, right? So,
and then you're putting a lot of pressure in that area, and do you have enough, nutrition, duck energy days, enough habitat to support
duck energy? I really want to get into because I was trying to explain that to somebody because that's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
But
that's how much energy you get from eating a duck.
Well, it is superfood, man. It is. Yeah, big fat. We cooked up we were hiking our butts off over the Thanksgiving weekend, and I took big rice field ducks and cooked them up in the camper, and
good stuff.
Oh, so good.
So that's what duck energy is?
No.
Oh, no.
Big duck energy.
Big duck energy.
But like state like South Dakota, right? That's where it's a major recreational traveling tourism economy for hunting. And in order to try to balance out that pressure, right, you have to draw for a specific week as a non-resident to go, which we've done in the past, and it's well worth doing, super fun. But yeah, waterfowl regulations can get pretty darn complicated,
it really
right?
can.
And it's like, okay, you can only shoot 5. We were just in Kansas. It's like you can shoot 5 mallards and an odd duck. You're like, well, okay, well, what do you consider odd?
That one had one eye.
very
kinda
So
bulging. It was
I
odd.
interpret that as it's a 6 duck limit. No more than 5 can be mallards.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I think it was 2 hens as well. So or mixed in there. Not
And then
as
if you're
one,
hunting
but-
public land, it could even get more, complicated because they might have specific regulations for that wildlife management area or something too. So unfortunately, I think sometimes people get really nervous if they're new to waterfowl hunting. There's a lot that could maybe try to keep you from waterfowl hunting. So that's where apprentice and going with friends is so important because they're going to know the rules and keep
There's
you
a
safe.
WMA in Arkansas that we were right next to, and God, I want to say you could only have, was it 12 shells in your possession?
Oh yeah, they'll limit however many
Which
shells you can have.
I love because it's like an anti-sky busting type of regulation. Type
Sure,
of deal,
man.
right?
You got every shot, dude. You shoot a lot different then.
Don't water swat that duck.
You bring a single shot. That'd be a good program
Yeah,
for that.
Yeah, because you don't want all your ducks leaving that area, right?
No
you
kidding.
want them
Limit
staying
your
in there.
shells.
Yep,
I loved it.
a lot of them do it.
I wouldn't. Last
After my
long.
Wyoming hunting experience, I thought that would be a good regulation to have for rifle hunting too. But
Yeah.
I had a trapper. I had a trapper recently tell me that when the guy that taught him to trap, he said the most valuable lesson he ever gave me is he says, I treat every trap like it's my only trap. And if you treated every shell like it was your only shell, dude, it'd be a lot different experience.
Well,
man.
yeah, I want to know what the psychological impact would be, even on a somebody who's a fantastic shot. If it's like, okay, here's your 5.
Yeah.
Right? Just like how that would change.
That'd actually be a fun
totally
game to
changes.
do, man.
It would.
Yeah, everyone will
to
start
hunt
yelling at
where you're
each
like,
other.
yeah.
Why didn't you shoot? Why didn't you? Well, I don't know. It's a little too far. Oh, you waited too long. Yeah. All these ducks would be flying by and everyone would be mad.
That'd be weird to have conversations like, why didn't you shoot rather than why did you shoot?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Because that's the normal conversation. What the hell are you doing?
Yep.
So,
My shot.
end of the season around here, especially, right? Like my goal, one of my recurring hunting goals is always to like end the season with my maximum possession limit of ducks, so I can carry
Nice.
through.
Feel good about it.
Yeah,
So your freezer's got 21 ducks in it.
yeah, and I want them all to be fat. You know, like that would be like the way to hit it perfect. But and you typically you're like, okay, cold weather, the ducks are going to be putting the feed bag on but you can your timing matters to where it's like, okay, all of a sudden there's a ton of birds in, but they just got there and they're really skinny.
Yeah.
Versus if the birds have been there for a few days, you want to get them right before they head out, because that's when they're at maximum duck energy, maximum fat.
Yep.
You have fed them well. Right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, so can you go into that? Because that's
Sure.
super fascinating, like how fast they burn
Oh,
those
yeah,
calories.
They definitely do. And like, again, I was talking about that North American Waterfowl Management Plan. There's different plans that waterfowl managers use, and they have a lot of state and regional requirements for, like, I don't know, it might be 400 million duck energy days in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley is what's needed to sustain those ducks. So a duck energy day is the amount of energy that one duck needs for one day, right? And so a duck energy day, and how much, like an acre is by like the acre. So it's like how many duck energy days are on this acre of land and providing how much energy. So if you had 1,000 ducks and you wanted them there for one day, you need 1,000 duck energy days in that 1 acre. So
In the form of what? In the form of whatever.
Yeah, and they'll do it by groups of species, by dabblers or different individual
But I'm saying, like,
species.
well, it's not. You're not talking about like spreading food out.
No, it could be like water
what you're
celery
growing.
or
Yeah.
soybeans or
Yeah,
But it's the caloric.
it's the caloric. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Some kind of food
That
whatever
provides-
regionally,
right.
regionally available food.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so how much? And so they have targets. So 110 days, I think, is what they typically keep for what they want to provide the food for ducks, in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley, for example. And so then you have to have in that whole area 400 million duck energy days to be able to support the waterfowl population that you're expecting to come into the Mississippi Alluvial Valley. Or a lot of states will do it in smaller regional areas too. And they might do it for wildlife management areas, different things like that, for what's the requirement of the duck energy days to make sure those animals have, lots of carbs, lots of other things to store that fat for their, migratory journey north as well.
So it's analogous basically to like a grazing unit, if you're thinking in terms of like cattle.
Cow-calf units.
Yeah, it's like an AUM basically, like what can this landscape sustain?
Right. What can it sustain? What can that, and it's by the acre. So what can that 1 acre, how many ducks can it support for that time period?
I was curious about this when you were talking about the variability in migration routes earlier, and talking about if there's no water in the potholes, they go up to the boreal.
Right.
And when I think about animal migration, I think about the like caloric tax on the animal, like especially when you're talking about big game, or the thing about like salmon, like it's something that I hadn't really considered in the waterfowl realm, but considering that their migration route could vary by hundreds of miles.
That's right.
Season to season. It's
Imagine.
kind of striking.
And then, of course, what kind of condition are they in when they get there? Now, they are feeding along the way, obviously. And depending on the species, they'll start switching over maybe to invertebrates right before they get there to the, to the nesting areas and to the prairies or whatnot. So they'll shift their diets and everything based on the type of food they need. But you want them to have in some of those southern states that high energy food, carbohydrates to get them there. But yeah, so it puts a tax on them when there's not water in the prairies, when wetlands are gone. I think in the prairies, I mean, depending on certain areas, it could be as high as 90% of the potholes or the wetlands have been lost. But in a lot of the prairies, over 50%, 50% of the by the mid 1980s, 50% were lost, which is why the North American Waterfowl, one of the reasons the North American Waterfowl Management Plan started was 1984, but in the mid 1980s, like half of all the wetlands had been lost across the United States in the lower 48.
How much does agricultural food sources offset that? Like, is there?
It's important.
Like, is it possible there's more ducks now because of agriculture than there was, say, 200 years ago when the middle of the country wasn't covered in corn and soybean and like?
Well, I can go back as far as the 1950s.
Let's not do 200 years ago, but pick a number, a known number, because that's a good question, right? Like, there's more, like when grain prices are high and everybody's producing grain, and all these farmers are switching to grain, that doesn't make up for all that lost ground.
No, because waterfowl need wetlands, and if the wetlands are gone, and and
you
because
have all the grain in the world.
And that time of year, they're feeding a lot on invertebrates, right? Because they're trying to eggshells and everything else and that protein. So they're really moving to protein that time of year. And that's what wetlands are they are just wonderful little soup.
So there's not like around here, like there used to be a lot of wheat production around here, and it's a lot of those fields are getting covered up in condo. Like, is that a concern?
Absolutely. And so we work a lot, because we want agriculture on the landscape, and because we don't want it to turn into condos and this and that. And so we work with NRCS, USDA, NRCS, and we work with landowners and farmers and ranchers to develop programs, both with federal partners, state partners, and then we have our own programs because we want to keep ranching and farming on the landscape and then working to keep wetlands and important grasslands in that landscape on there, right? Whether it's through incentives, through education, because soil health practices, a lot of soil health practices and other things that we can work with landowners and farmers to improve. It's going to be better for them economically. They're going to have a better crop. It's going to help with, sedimentation, runoff, all of that. And then it's also, putting in cover crops and other things for waterfowl is beneficial, again, for them and then also for wildlife. So there's a lot of practices that we can work on with farmers and ranchers. So we want them on that landscape, and they're critical partners for us.
There's not a lot of duck energy in condos.
Not a lot of duck energy in condos, no.
When you talk about losing half of our wetlands, can you
being drained?
Yeah, put some numbers around that. Like what's the start? Like what's a starting point? You're not talking about European arrival in the New World. Like there's like what?
No. Since like a lot of development in the U.S., right? Okay. And so like the Mississippi, Mississippi River Basin, I think it's estimates of almost 80% been lost of wetlands. And if you think about it, since flooding along the Mississippi
over the last just ballpark it.
I'd say, golly, what would be the year mark? I mean, last
like post World War II.
Yeah, 1900s, early 1900s,
okay.
You can say.
What percent?
Like in the Mississippi River Basin, like 80%. But what I think a number I read, by the mid 1980s, I believe a number I read is that like 50% in the lower 48 were lost. And think about it, draining a lot of wetlands for building, for
farm ground.
It can be for farm ground. It can be for you name it. I mean, it's
reclamation districts, right? Yeah,
everything. So they're constantly under attack, and people don't understand not everyone understands the importance of a wetland and that they can provide so many other things other than just waterfowl habitat and habitat for lots of other, fish, bird species, everything. But also it helps with, flood attenuation if you're talking along the Mississippi River. It helps with storm resiliency on shorelines. It helps with clean water filtration. I mean, they are nature's kidneys. They're nature's sponges. They filter out phosphorus, nitrogen, all these, and then they also help store water during heavy rain events to keep from flooding issues. So wetlands are really important to people and wildlife.
And that's what when I started hunting Saskatchewan and Alberta a long time ago. I haven't been up there in years for waterfowl, but the amount of DU work north of the border, which was interesting too, because also you would hear from people like, "Oh, I don't contribute to DU because they just spend all my money in Canada."
Yep.
Right, but that's where they're growing the ducks.
They spend all my money right where all my ducks come from.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So until the mid-1980s, we did not do work in the U.S. We did only work in the Canadian prairies in Canada.
Seriously?
Because that's where the majority of waterfowl were. And it was in the mid-80s, again, that waterfowl management plan that I was talking about started looking at, okay, well, we need to start, and not just Ducks Unlimited, but federal, state, provincial partners, everybody coming together and saying, we need to look at all of these important landscapes. And there's a lot in the U.S. as well. So we started work in the U.S. prairies in the mid-1980s. And then, of course, other priority landscapes from there, and also down into Mexico. So that really didn't start until the mid-1980s. But like you said, putting the most money we can into those highest priority landscapes, which is going to be your Canadian prairies, U.S. prairies, the boreal, but there's other critical landscapes as well that we just were talking about as far as the importance of wintering habitat as well. So it's a lot of great programs out there, and I should go ahead and make a plug for hunters that every time you buy that duck stamp goes to permanent protection of wetlands in the United States. And there's a major portion of those dollars that go into the U.S. prairies. And so that $25 stamp, you're putting a permanent easement on a piece of property on land that is held by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's part of actually the refuge system. But we have now, through this program, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the joint venture partners, and others have secured protection of 30% of the breeding pair habitat that's necessary. So that's pretty impressive. 30% of that nesting important critical habitat through duck stamp. So hunters are doing their part. We always say hunters pay for conservation. I mean, this is a very clear point A to point B. 98% of the duck stamp sales go right into on-the-ground conservation easements. And so any enthusiast that buys a duck stamp for art or other purposes just because they like them, they are putting that money towards conservation on the ground. And it's made, I can't think of another group of species of that size where we have been able to protect that large amount of through an effort like that.
The guy that painted this year's duck stamp was sitting right in that seat you're sitting in.
No way. So I was the judge for last year's duck stamp.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe you
so
picked
him.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, super
So
nice guy.
there's 5 judges, so I was one of them. But yeah, cool.
Does how does Ducks Unlimited preserve, save, protect wetlands? I mean, do you have a lobbying arm that does policy?
We definitely
and
do.
then you also have like
On the ground.
like on the ground money, like money spent. What
Yep.
like explain those different
Yeah,
ways
and
it's done.
sorry to jump in, but will you also say like the public ground and private ground, like what the kind of the split is?
Okay.
Almost like a where the money goes type
All
thing. Lobbying, public, private.
Yep. So we have we get a lot of public dollars that we apply for, whether it's the North American Wetlands Conservation dollars. Those are wetland dollars that it was enacted in 1989 to help support that waterfowl management plan. So we get a lot of money through that, but we also work a lot with NRCS and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to work on refuges. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we work a lot with state agencies on public land. But we now have about 400 conservation staff. So in Ducks Unlimited, about 400 staff are biologists, scientists, GIS. I've got a lot of engineers, engineer techs, all doing this work on the ground. So on the ground habitat work on private and public land. From a public land perspective, in the last several years, we've probably had conservation practices over, maybe close to 600,000 about 600,000 acres on public land, so on national wildlife refuges, state agencies, and a lot of those are more intensive projects. Those are going to be your water wetland enhancement, wetland creation, a lot
Rehabilitation.
of rehabilitation, a
Pulling
ton
out
of that.
drain tile.
Yeah, or
God.
building some of that infrastructure, and so you can manipulate water levels and everything else. So there's a lot more work that goes into it. A lot of the work that we do on private land is going to be more your technical assistance, or the money that we apply for with USDA, NRCS, to do farm practices that benefit conservation practices on farm and things like that. So it's a lot more on the private land. It's a lot more of working with farmers and ranchers and things like that. Is more that those types of acres. And the first part of your question, though, I was trying to go back to real quick. You were talking about
Lobbying.
Oh yeah. So what are the different?
I mean, like,
things
how
that
do you
we
influence? How do you influence the loss
Yeah.
of wetlands?
So a lot of that, we have a group of folks that are policy specialists. We have some in D.C. and then we also have some regionally, because there are going to be regional instances as well that we're going to have these policy experts. But we work a lot with policymakers on farm bill is a big one that we work on to make sure that there's conservation practices in there. Another one is to ensure that we have complete full funding for NAWCA, the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. It's enacted, and it's about $50 million a year for that. So they work really hard to ensure that we have those types of dollars available to put on the ground for conservation. So they spend a lot of time working on that. And then our teams in the field, they are constantly looking for new funding sources or new partners to work with, because the more partners that you work with, the better. Like with NAWCA, they've now, through North American Wetlands Conservation Act, though I think it's 32 million acres have been conserved, not just by Ducks Unlimited, but 32 million acres have been conserved through that program, and it has spent $2 billion. But it's a 1-to-1 matching program, so it requires, for every dollar spent of federal dollars, it requires a non-federal dollar. And so there have been over $5 billion raised to match that $2 billion to put those 32 million acres on the ground. And it takes a lot of partners. I think through that program, there's over 6,000 partners that have participated in that program. So our teams are constantly looking for federal, non-federal, nonprofit, local organizations to partner with to get that habitat on the ground. It is a daunting task to
and
conservation.
What's a way that it might happen? Meaning, let's say I'm a farmer.
All right.
Okay, and I have 1,000 acres and I have some wetlands, and I'm like, man, I also love to hunt ducks and I like to make money on my farm. And I come and say to DU, how can I be of assistance, or what can I do? Like,
so
what measures are at someone's disposal?
Lots of things, everything from permanent protection, putting a conservation easement on that property so that it's, always in whatever that is as far as the percentage of wetlands and grass and everything.
And you guys help with that process.
And we help with that process. Yeah. And those easements are held by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and those were some of the duck stamp dollars I was talking about earlier. Other things might be, they might be interested in a conservation reserve program where they take out, and that's through NRCS, and so they take out a certain percentage of their production and they put it in, they plant it in grass or in something else, and so they might do that, or so it's like a rental payment, or they might do EQIP, and they might do rental payments not rental payments, they might do different cost share to try to improve their property for the conservation values on there. So there's all sorts of different farm bill programs that they could be interested in. And so our team will walk through all these different programs that they have. And again, Ducks Unlimited has a lot of programs as well, that as long as they're doing these activities and we're cost sharing for those conservation activities, as long as they continue to do those, we're in that like annual year-to-year contract. But that permanent protection is the best thing we can do. And our director of operations in the Prairie Pothole region, Johan Walker, he's always saying, all right, we've got to slow down the pace of conversion and increase the pace of protection, But there's lots of other tools, in between that we can use that benefit farmers and ranchers and help improve what they're getting out of it, but then also for wildlife and waterfowl as well.
Is currently the number one risk to wetlands cropland conversion?
In the Prairie Pothole region, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a landowner, a farmer is incentivized by prices, whatever, to convert, to increase and convert land to ag.
Yep. And so that's
and
why
you have a way to try to soften.
Absolutely.
It'd be the same thing. Like, Ducks Unlimited, Farm Bill programs, NRCS. They are going to also try to make sure that farmer knows the available incentives.
That's right.
Yeah.
To not produce crops on intermittent wetland.
So it doesn't need to just cost.
Yeah, so you can
ways to make it that it doesn't just cost the landowner.
You can do the right
That's
thing
right.
for wildlife without affecting the bottom line.
Yeah, because a lot of times the wetlands, even though it might be dry, it might look dry that year kind of a thing, that's not going to be your most productive soil for crop.
Yeah.
It is going to be your most productive for wildlife, but not necessarily for crop. Those are usually not the same thing. And so the education and working with them, and a lot of our farmers, they love seeing the ducks on the landscape, and they love being able to help. And it's like, okay,
you just got to get
help my
them to
bottom
love
number.
that as much as driving in a straight line.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
think about it. It's a pain in the butt to go around that wetland. You're driving this big equipment and everything, and it's a pain in the butt to go around those wetlands. So, yeah, we have to find ways to incentivize landowners to want to keep wetlands and certain grasslands intact. And there's lots of ways to do that, and it's through these great partnerships, our federal and state partnerships, and partnerships with the landowners that make it happen.
What do you think about North American Grasslands Conservation Act? Do you think that's getting towards a workable state? Something?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's gone back and forth, and I know a lot of it's being modeled off of North American off of NACA, and what works necessarily in this program, will it work here? And so I think it's definitely evolving and becoming something that, it's critical. There's lots of grassland species that need protection, and you can see, the 3 billion bird report, right? You have a lot of species that have been declining, since the 1970s, and a lot of them are grassland species. Now, NACA, there's a lot that goes into grasslands as well through NACA funding, and when we look at some of those priority landscapes that we want to protect, a lot of them we look at duck pairs, right? How many pairs of breeding ducks are going to be in that landscape, and we want to target the highest numbers, the 100 duck pairs. But with that come like 15 to 20 different other grassland bird species that use that same landscape. So it's not just one thing that we're looking at or the other. So any kind of conservation funding opportunities that we can provide that have these great public-private partnerships associated with them for conservation, the more of that we can get, I think the better off we're going to.
And that's where like some of the social cost of using wetland comes in, because most people are like, well, wetland is only a wetland if it's wet.
Yes.
And then also that fringe area around the wetland with the grass, like there's a lot of waterfowl species that nest in that.
That's right.
Right.
And how far are they going to go?
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's like, well, it's not wet.
Conservation is not a simple thing, and it really takes a large group of people kind of pulling in the harness together to make it happen.
You know who I think deserves a little credit? I make a lot of jokes about golf. Well, a very famous golfer sat in that seat you're sitting in right now.
Really? Which one? My husband will be
Brian
jealous.
Harmon.
All right.
The Butcher. Brian the Butcher Harmon.
Brian the Butcher Harmon.
Anyways, you know who deserves some credit? Is the golf course by my house.
Yeah.
It's a duck factory.
Really?
All those little ponds they made.
Yeah.
Every one of those ponds. And they have like some great nesting success. Every one of those ponds full of chicks all summer.
So do they...
Fake ponds.
Do they put a lot of like edge around that pond? Are they shallow? Did they do that specifically,
That
or is
golf
it just
course
by
was
chance?
probably a wetland before it was a golf course.
That's what I'm wondering. That's where I'm going.
There's a
Now
lot
the
of
truth
springs.
comes
These are like
out.
there's a bunch of spring-fed ponds, and they kick off a lot of ducks.
Huh.
But when you see that
I
little
don't know why
white
I'm
ball
throwing
go
that out,
high
but-
in the air, it's worth it. I'll tell you.
Kapoosh, right into there. Did you guys weigh in on? Did Ducks Unlimited weigh in on this the sort of political ping pong ball of WOTUS, Waters of the United States?
Yeah, Waters of the United States. So
Can we test my ability to explain this? Okay,
go for it.
The United States, the federal government declares like sovereignty over certain waterways. Meaning, like for instance, if a private landowner owns both sides of the Mississippi, they can't say no more shipping up and down my river, right? Because the U.S. has jurisdiction over the waterway, and there's a political ping pong about how far up a river into non-navigable or barely navigable water does the U.S. have jurisdiction, and could there be a thing where U.S. jurisdiction extends all the way up into the headwaters in the wetlands, and they could the federal government could exercise some management rights over marshes and wetlands that form the rivers. So extending up the Mississippi beyond navigation, but up into the sources of the Mississippi, and use that as a way to preserve wetlands. And when I say a political ping pong ball, is it seems to like always be in the news of a new administration interpreting it differently. One administration would be like, oh no, it goes all the way to the marsh, and the other next administration, no, it ends at navigability. And it seems to be always in the news.
Yep.
It's never quite resolved.
Yeah.
This is a hot issue. What's been your guys' attitude about this conversation?
So what we've been trying to do is working with the states on what their wetland regulations and laws and rules will be.
Okay.
Because that's really where it, at the end of the day, because you're right, it's this ping pong, back and forth. But if you're working with the states and working with the landowners and those rules in those states, that's probably how we're going to be able to kind of get through this as far as
so you can take action now
wetlands.
that doesn't get done or undone
right
every time the political winds change.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, because states have their own regulations now, especially with the latest change.
So you when I was talking about lobbying earlier, Ducks Unlimited will at times try to influence regulation about wetland development.
Yeah, we work a lot more, I'd say, on the funding for wetlands conservation, and from that standpoint. And so
you spend more time with the carrot than the stick.
Yeah, a lot more time with the carrot than the stick, because it gets you a lot further. We've in the last 5 years developed an ag strategic plan. If you look at everywhere that is important for waterfowl, if you take our landscape conservation priorities and I put that map down in front of you, and then you took an ag map in the United States and you laid that over it, it's almost exactly the same.
It's like if you take wolf attacks on cattle.
Right? Right, what we were talking about earlier, exactly. More rural people. Yeah. So it is critical that we have strong relationships and partnerships with the ag and ranching.
So Metro Chicago doesn't pop up on
your not too much.
You're important for Duck Zone.
No,
I'm sure there's a strong DU chapter there.
There's a lot of strong DU chapters there.
That's a good point it's an interesting point about the need to have the ability to work with agricultural interests.
Yep.
You're right.
Critical.
If you look at like where birds are coming from, it's agricultural landscapes.
Yep.
So I imagine if an organization was just sort of perceived as being vehemently anti-ag, you might wind up having a hard time to work in ag country.
Might be hard to work in ag country. So, there are disincentives that I think are important to keep, and incentives that are important to keep. And I think it's a balance of those two things to ensure we get that right outcome. So there are disincentives in place that, like Swamp Buster and everything else, that are important. But what that is it's keeping, if you're a farmer and you're in farm bill programs, right, and you're getting something from a farm bill program, you can't plow under a wetland or drain a wetland. So that's a type of a disincentive, but then incentives for some of the things I was talking about with Conservation Reserve Program or EQIP or wetland reserve easement, where you're putting your land permanently in an easement protection, or, there's different properties.
It's like there's not necessarily like a one-size-fits-all deal, too, because between like the state and the federal programs, you could have the ability to leave that intermittent wetland alone most of the time. Mm-hmm. But you could take hay off of it, you could graze it, but at certain times of year that fit in with
Great
the
example.
breeding nesting program.
I'm glad you brought that up. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. I mean, that's a really good point. And so each state is going to be different. So North Dakota, South Dakota, what programs are available, what's allowed, not allowed.
And sometimes it's your flyway too, right? Like if you're in an area that's trying to bring back sandhill crane, certain properties along that flyway are going to pay more for all these programs.
Yep. And the great thing about these programs, and even an easement, they're voluntary, of course, but if you put an easement on your property, the landowner can still use the land. But then it's that being able to be there for habitat for waterfowl and other species for generations.
Yeah, a buddy of mine, big farmer in South Dakota, he, it's the most awesome feel-good story ever. He started just getting into these programs because it made more financial sense than trying to farm this stuff. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, we remove the diesel fuel, we remove the seed costs, the nitrogen costs, all these costs to farm something marginal to not get a return, but we also don't have to turn our steering wheel. Started picking up a couple of bucks for different things, saw some good improvement, saw crazy stuff happen. Like all of a sudden they had prairie chickens on the ranch. Mm-hmm. And it's because we were in the state program. Oh, super cool. That, incentivized native grasses. So you saw good drought tolerance increase, fire tolerance increase. And then the other cool thing that they saw increase was just family interest in the farm. Because it's like, well, 20 years ago, there was nothing else to look at other than the row you were hoeing, basically. And now there's like deer running around, there's lots of birds, there's raptors, all sorts of wildlife increase. And the interest level from, the small family members who don't really care about the financial part of things, they're like, oh, this is a cool place to be.
Yep. But then you get one of those guys that drives around pissed off all the time. They're paying them not to farm.
Yeah.
Well, it's the farm the best and leave the rest, right? But I love coming to the prairies and listening to the stories. So cattle and ducks go really well together, right? They both need grass and everything. And so I love coming to the prairies and listening to the testimonials of some of these folks that, drained a wetland years ago with their great-grandfather, but then are putting it back, and they love the family interest and the kids are enjoying it. But then, or some of them that decide we're going into ranching, and they convert, from farming, from crop to ranching, and takes a ton of money for them to do it, and they're probably losing money and not always in the best spot. But then there's programs that are available to help them out, or putting in practices on that working farm that are going to protect wetlands. And so it's pretty fun to listen to the testimonials, just like you were just saying to your buddy, that of what happens too when they join some of these programs.
I got two quick Ducks Unlimited banquet stories for you.
Oh, I love these. I can't wait.
One time I was in the market for a new fish finder.
Yeah.
And I was able to I was buying it anyway. But I was able to buy $1,000 gift card to Bass Pro Shops for $700.
Isn't that crazy?
It was like I basically bought $1,000 for $700.
Yeah. Don't you love it?
My other story is
and you got a bottomless beer for $10.
And you got a bottomless beer.
My other story is this. My buddy Ron, he was at one of those and he was drunk and he was bidding on something, but he was in his mind, he was buying what was up next.
Oh no! Oh no!
Ronnie.
So he's looking at what's up next.
Oh no!
He's like, I can't believe nobody else is going
And
after
he's like
this.
bidding and bidding, and
Ronnie.
he wins. And his buddy's like, "What the hell you want that?" Because they're like in another state. He's like, "What do you want that picnic table for so bad?"
Oh my gosh!
Whatever it was.
Ronnie.
Yep.
He's like, "No, I was bidding on that."
That'll
not that."
happen. That'll happen.
I love our banquets and really get so many supporters through them.
Oh, man.
And,
It's like
people
it's like a
come
carnival.
in. Well, they come for the party, but then they stay for the ducks, right? So
Yeah, it's like a carnival for
pretty cool.
adults.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
Is that still functioning good? Like,
Oh, yeah.
because COVID probably killed it for a while, right?
You would have thought, man, that team, they are absolutely incredible. David Schusler, he's the chief of that team. They pivoted so fast. They're like, okay, guys, we're going to be shut down. I'm thinking, we'll be shut down for a couple weeks. It'll all come back.
Mm-hmm.
He had different ideas. So they went to all this online stuff almost immediately. And
Did they really? Yeah.
and everyone's sitting at home looking for something to do. And we had all sorts of different interactive ways for people to join online. And then as soon as we could go back outside, they were setting up big tents and, going state by state. I don't know if they slept much during that time, but they were actually able to keep our event system rolling. And then we had our major donors. I cannot tell you how important our volunteers and our major donors are. Like I was talking about all the match for all these programs. Like I think we had $176 million in public dollars last year
Did you really?
our team brought in. But that takes a bunch of match, and our donors are incredible and how our philanthropists that give. But then also everybody that goes to an event and the money that first dollar comes in an event and the dollars that they spend there, how that goes to conservation. It's a pretty incredible organization. It's been a lot of fun the last 5 years, and looking for many more. But I didn't realize before I came to work for Ducks Unlimited that passion that is with all of those volunteers, with the staff, with our major donors, and they really came through in COVID. Our major donors stepped up like they never had before to make sure that Ducks Unlimited was going to be able to make it through it. So
My friend Mark here in town, he made a rule a couple of years ago that he lets a lot of people hunt on his place, but you can't hunt his place unless you're a DU member.
I like that.
Oh.
That's great. He's got something there.
No, and which reminds me, I got to make sure my kids are still up because I kind of extended it to my kids by I got to make sure I didn't violate his rule because we went out there for the youth season. I better double check. You might see a couple memberships Bing later
I was
on
gonna
today.
say, I
That's
bet
why you just got to get that lifetime membership right now.
Yeah.
I happen to have a membership form right here. No.
You'll never have to worry about it again.
I did lifetime at Turkey Federation. Yep. I did lifetime at Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, but I should do my lifetime at DU. My next lifetime should be DU lifetime.
Well, or you can just annually, support Ducks Unlimited.
No, I'll be better.
That's the caveat of the lifetime membership.
Yeah, because
a lot of people think they're done.
No, there's no lifetime membership. It's you're never done.
Yeah,
it is a lifetime.
How much do you guys get? How much public money from all you guys' efforts?
I think last year it was around 175, 76 million.
Man.
Yeah. Our team spends a lot of time writing a lot of grants, and it's like I said, it's diverse. We don't just one type of funding, and that's something that we all need to be thinking about. Are what are those funding opportunities like all the other benefits that wetlands provide? What types of funding opportunities and streams can come from that as well? Because we need to be able to diversify. Unfortunately, we probably aren't going to have as many hunters sitting around the table in however many years. I hope I'm wrong, but how do we get other people to understand the importance of the conservation work? Because I do think, sportsmen are our first conservationists. And so how do we encourage other people to have that same interest in whether it's turkeys or mule deer or National Deer Association, whoever it is.
But that's a lot of interest because there's only 1 million duck hunters.
Right.
So you guys did $175 million public dollars.
But yeah.
What's that?
Well, I mean, as far as duck hunters, and how many members we have, there's probably more duck hunters. But you're right. There's
what I'm saying,
not
it's like a lot of it's a lot of per
capita
because you know how many duck stamps get bought.
I was gonna say you always hear people talk about anybody can buy a duck stamp. I'm curious how many.
I bet it's 5 people buy them that aren't duck hunters.
That's my suspicion, but I'm wondering if you have any insight into that.
Max Barta buys one for his dog.
Yeah, well, there's people that buy multiples.
I buy several. Yeah, I buy
I buy
multiples
several
because I
too,
want
yeah.
one to keep, and then I want one that I've got to
I
sign.
I buy multiples because I forgot I already bought one,
Yeah,
and then I do it
or
again.
I lose them, or that too.
But I think it's probably. I mean, there are exceptions. I feel like it's probably a pretty clean.
I don't know because I was really surprised when I did the duck stamp judging last year, which I thought was like the coolest thing ever. By the way, I didn't realize how cool it was. But there were a lot of art enthusiasts that were kind of like chiming in on the online thing. I went and looked at it later.
Really?
And that
Not hunters.
or that are not hunters. Now I don't know what
So
the
we'll
percentage
count all
is.
10 of them.
We'll count all 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it is. I mean, it is. The majority is going to be hunters and have been doing it. Since the first one, Ding Darling, in 1934. Should have that off the top of my head. But it's mostly going to be your duck hunters.
You know what Cal and I are going to do? He doesn't know this yet, but
boy.
when we retire, I got a couple things on my list that I'm going to do with my retirement project. But
We're going to get you a dog?
No, I'm going to try to establish a universal blaze orange requirement of a hat.
Mm-hmm.
No more than a hat. A hat.
A hat.
Orange hat.
I've seen quite a few Montana hunters out there already are on board with that.
Right.
A hat.
Yeah.
Not because when you're wearing a vest and you're trying to change your clothes, it's just too much. It's a hat. A hat's great. See that hat?
Mm-hmm.
Orange.
I know the hat's got the
Not
same
super
issue though. It's
safe.
like every time I'm always
Put
turning
your
to
hood
be
up
like
when you get
I'm like,
cold.
Yep.
Yep. Putting something else on.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna write a book about how it's okay to hate Shakespeare.
Okay.
And then I wanna work on Cal and I want to work on a public service thing to get the waterfowling community to take field care of their ducks more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Spread
They
it.
are,
Yeah.
as you demonstrated today, they are exceptionally generous with their conservation dollars. But I think that as a group, I can't think of a more egregious. And I hunted ducks yesterday, or geese and ducks. I can't think of a more egregious group of people when it comes to utilization of the resource.
Really?
Oh,
Well, you remember the dinner
it's
that we
just
had?
I can't think of a more egregious group, a more generous but egregious group of people.
The dinner that we had when we came out for the survey release 2 years ago. Like if there was just more of that going on, like people are like, oh, here's my recipe, here's what I do, more of that type of sharing. That's pretty darn limited
So are
in
you
the
saying
waterfowl
in
community.
the field, or are you saying once they
I'm
don't
saying
eat the duck?
utilization of
You gotta explain.
okay.
Come on.
Yeah.
Well, okay. For instance, well, not for instance. Here's the thing that I
Looking for ways to use the duck.
I couldn't
versus
believe
not
that
use
our
the duck.
state did this.
Oh,
Our
yeah.
state used to have salvage. We have salvage requirements in this state. Okay, many states have salvage requirements. They actually lowered the salvage requirement, meaning on a mallard-sized bird, you were required to keep the thighs. You're required to keep the breast meat and the thighs. And one day they all of a sudden said, like, you know, like now it's okay just to throw that in the garbage.
You got to keep the breasts. You don't have
Okay.
to retain the
But
thighs.
I'm saying like among, I think it's triggered by a bunch of things. There's the strictly enforced, and I'm not saying you should get away with it, the strictly enforced possession limit thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where people, like, if you're out hunting ducks for a week, but you can only have 3 days of possession, I think it inspires a lot of people to try to find ways to offload ducks. And there's just so many stories of guys looking off bridges, and there's hundreds of snow geese carcasses. Like, it's just like, as a community, I think the waterfowl community as a community is very poor about utilizing the meat from the birds.
And I have not
and not
seen,
wanting to
witnessed
do
that,
not wanting to do any kind of work.
And you shouldn't feel compelled to agree with him.
No,
on
no,
this.
no.
You
I'm
can-
not going to.
You don't
I
need
have
to.
not seen that. However, what I will
Really?
say, no, I haven't. Honestly,
Okay.
You should
But-
read the comments. I'll pluck a duck and put it on Instagram, and you should read the hateful comments about how much time that
Offended.
takes. The offense
Offended, dude.
that someone would take the time to pluck a duck.
why do they care if you pluck the duck?
It
It's
offends
the internet.
them.
Oh, well,
Yes.
that doesn't make. But you know, there are things that I think, to your point of recipes and this and that. We do a lot of stuff in the magazine
yeah.
and online.
Always
we
in
could
the
do it with our.
magazine.
We
Yeah.
could do it probably with our podcast.
I'm not blaming DU for this. I'm
Well,
just saying
I
like
should
someday I
hope not.
want to do like a public
Yeah,
service thing
but-
about like how ducks taste. It's gonna be called Ducks Taste Really Good.
Legs and wings.
Well, there used to be the old joke of, the best way to cook a goose, you put it on
a
this
board
cedar
and
board,
throw
and then you
board
throw it in,
and,
and then you keep the
eat
board,
the
right?
board
Yeah.
and- yeah.
Yep. So, which is totally not true. I have eaten some damn good geese and some damn good ducks over the last however many years of my life, and it is in the preparation of it and everything else. Just
Yeah.
like, I hear a lot of, even deer hunters. Well, there's a lot of stuff they got to cut through on the shoulder, so I don't keep the shoulder meat.
Yeah.
Well, hold on a second. So you could do this, you could grind it up. So there's all sorts of things that we could all learn from each other if maybe we had that better community of here are things that you can do. Squirrel hunters. A lot of squirrel hunters are like, oh, it's a lot of work to clean a fox squirrel. They're so much harder than gray squirrels. I'm like, well, then don't shoot the damn fox squirrel.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't want to clean, don't shoot it.
Go down to the butcher shop, spend $60 on the nicest ribeye steak you can find.
Yep,
and
there
then
you
cover
go.
it in hair and bile and let it sit
You're in
out.
good shape. Yum.
And then tell me what you think of
Yeah.
beef.
You know what?
that's
I
some more
regret bringing that up and act
Oh.
like that's your problem. I feel like I ruined the whole show. But
No, you
let me-
did not.
I want to reapproach it.
I'm just saying it's probably, but.
I want to reapproach it.
Right.
I want to
All
say
right.
this. I want to have Phil remove all that, and it'll just be me saying that, man, a well-handled duck
Is damn good.
is just really good.
It is.
Is
It's true.
really good.
Yep. It is. It is phenomenal.
And when you take geese breasts and make pastrami, it's really, really good. That's all.
That's all.
Take all that out, Phil.
Reuben
It
sandwiches.
seemed
man.
like I kind of ruined the whole show, didn't it?
No.
No, just picking on duck hunters. That's all I'm saying.
No, but I was praising duck hunters.
I'm just teasing.
I was praising them about how generous and dedicated they are.
My litmus test is though, like when somebody's like, "Oh yeah, you like to hunt ducks? Well, you should come hunt." I'm like, "Cool. How do you cook them?"
Yeah. That's right.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And to this day, one of the best duck hunting connections I've ever made was from that exact conversation.
That's
Guy being like, "Well, this is what we do," and I was like, "Okay, we can talk more."
Yep.
Yeah. So
Duck is really good.
Far be it for me to stereotype, but I'll tell you, you want to see the ones I know. The Cajuns are some duck eating,
Yes, they are.
duck preparing
Whole
sons of
duck,
bitches,
yeah.
man.
yes,
I mean, they eat the beak.
yeah,
That's that. See, I'm trying to go positive.
yeah.
I'm trying to
You're
be like
doing great.
DU
You're
and
doing
go
great.
carrot, not the stick.
That's right.
I'm trying to go positive.
That's right.
Yeah. God, it ruined the whole show. Was that bad, Phil? When I brought it up, did it seem like a bit kind of deflated everything?
Well, there have been occurrences in the past that I think you probably should have had that reaction to. I don't think this is one of them.
I actually think saying that
Phil's
you
going this time.
This was the line.
calling this for the eighth time saying that you've ruined the show, I think, is doing more. It's adding.
Probably.
Christmas is coming up. Oh
Just
my
to
god.
dig the hole deeper. As we were on the way down here, Cal and I were talking about this issue.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, that was the.
That's
it's
what
just,
I came in the room with it on my mind.
There's just like
An
cultures.
anecdote. Someone had shared an anecdote
And I
with
wonder
Cal.
if it's a local thing that you're seeing here.
It
Right?
is, yeah.
I think it's a local thing. Like, I promise you, I hunt mostly in the South, but I've hunted other places as well. And I don't see that. I see it as like everyone comes back to the duck camp, and what are we going to have? It's going to be duck. I mean,
That's
and,
awesome.
And it's
Yeah.
cooked 100 different
But I think
ways.
it's regional
Yeah.
cultures, right? And there's, it's like people who don't have the experience or they're trying to get into it and they don't already even do what a lot of us would. They're preparing things out of the box versus cooking something. They're very instruction based. Like they have a very hard time grasping any sort of bird.
Yep.
Right.
Last time I checked, everybody wants to be like MeatEater, and they want to, I'm all joking aside, you guys do a really good job of bringing that to the table, right? Literally to the table, as far as, the that importance and that full cycle and what you do. I think, you Ducks Unlimited, other people like that, whatever the game species is. Talking about that importance of being off the landscape and it providing that wonderful protein that we all crave so much.
Excellent. That's good.
See how I
Made it positive.
Saved your ass.
Carroted.
No, it's good. We were talking about the other day what someone needs to make an invention of is that
besides the flat tree.
Besides
I already invented that.
is a machine. If you could come up with this, it'd be a machine that you put ducks into.
Okay. Oh.
And you turn the machine on. In the morning, you got duck sausage sticks waiting for you on the other end.
Good luck with that one.
I like it. I'm trying to figure
Can you
out how you
imagine,
make that
just
happen.
like you wake up in the morning and just that machine's shut down, and it's just pepperoni sticks.
Man, let me tell you, I am the most popular person at Christmas right now because I have a lot of duck sausage, and it is so freaking good.
When Cal and I were talking, we were talking about this very thing, and I was saying, like, it doesn't matter. Any idea about whether you like ducks or not, everybody likes pepperoni sticks.
That's right.
So if you go duck hunting, get all your duck breasts, put them in a pile, and make a bunch of pepperoni sticks.
They're damn good.
Because, like, everybody likes those.
Put a bunch of, honey in there, make them
Hell
sweet.
yeah.
A little,
So then at the end of the duck season, you got 20 pounds of pepperoni sticks that you drive around eating. Do that.
There you go. They make great Christmas gifts. Everybody wants them.
There you go. Pepperoni stick. Yeah.
You want to get crazy? Put them in a pickling brine afterwards.
Oh, I never heard of
Oh,
that.
dude.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I've done that.
Pickled pepperoni sticks?
Yeah. Pickle the sausage
Extra
afterwards.
salt.
Oh.
Oh, you're right. Because like in the old days, you go into a bar and you'd have the sausage in the pickle jar.
Yeah. Good stuff, man.
Stick your whole
Next
hand
thing
In
you
the
know,
South, it's chicken feet.
Yeah.
But
Since I quit drinking, I forgot about that. And the really good bar would have eggs in a pickle jar. They'd have sausages in a pickle
Turkey
jar.
gizzards. The
everyone-
Missoula
did
Club.
you not have chicken feet and stuff like that?
That's not where I grew up.
No.
No. We ate a lot of smoked stuff.
Yeah.
But pickling wasn't huge in the Midwest.
Yeah.
No. Great. And what else? Is there anything I didn't ask you about?
I don't know. There's all sorts of neat things. We could play this game all day.
Yeah, probably a lot of things I didn't ask you about. But is there any like super pressing thing that I should have brought up?
No, I think we covered a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
It's been educational.
Yeah.
Because man, I hate any kind of story about wildlife going downhill over the years, and it's distressing to think of all that wetlands loss.
It is. It is very distressing, and so I think it's obviously what we do at Ducks Unlimited. We think about it every day because it is part of our mission and our vision is to make sure that it's here that waterfowl are here for many generations to enjoy. So.
When you crystal ball it, do you think what's your prediction? Like in 100 years, are people going to hunt ducks?
Heck yeah, they're going to hunt ducks in 100 years. Absolutely, and we're going to have waterfowl fill in the skies too. And it's because of hunters. It's because of conservation enthusiasts. A lot of reasons. Organizations like Ducks Unlimited and many other conservation organizations. We're going to have it.
So in 100 years, I'll be driving around eating duck pepperoni sticks.
Hell yeah,
And
you are.
You'll get
And
4
Brian, you're going to
pintails.
love it.
4 pintails, yeah.
There's a great article. This came out a long time ago. You probably read it, but there's this guy's talking about his lamenting living in a big city, and he's missing waterfowl season. But life has him working in a big city, and he steps out onto the subway platform, and there's a V of geese going over. And he's looking up at this V of geese, then he, for whatever reason, kind of scans the crowd out there and finds the one other person going like this. He's like, and that was my waterfowl hunter.
That was my.
But we need folks in the big cities to clue in on stuff like this too. So,
So let's do a checklist. Like if you're a duck hunter, you got to buy your duck stamp.
Got to buy your duck stamp.
So you got to do that anyways, and that's like that's a lot of funding for wetlands.
Absolutely.
If you're duck hunting, you should probably join Ducks Unlimited.
100%.
Because if you go and duck hunting, you want to get ducks. If you want to get ducks, you need wetlands, and Ducks Unlimited does wetlands work.
You got it.
So there's that. If you like to have fun, go to the banquets.
They're a lot of fun.
Like I said, it's a carnival for grown-ups.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you can win a picnic table.
Dude, you can win like a truck. I mean, how many guys do you know that have been hunting their whole lives don't have guns from the DU banquet?
Yeah, or prints or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, my silverware is Ducks Unlimited silverware.
Sure.
For Pete's sake.
My old man had an Ithaca. He had an Ithaca Featherlight 20 gauge, and guess where that came from? The DU banquet.
That's right.
So do that. Go to the banquets and hang out. And then if you got it, if you could swing some extra jingle and you're a duck hunter, like make some donations up above and beyond your membership. Because the membership's pretty inexpensive.
Yes, it is.
It's like a foot in the door.
It's a foot in the door, and it's it's very important.
Sure.
But and we leverage those dollars 3, 4, 5 times to try to get as much conservation on the ground. So our leverage rate on donor dollars is very high.
Yep. And as you mentioned, like for a lot of these programs, it's good to have private money because it helps you activate grant
those public dollars. Yeah, without those private funds, we can't go after NACA dollars or any Farm Bill, any of those other dollars, because it takes that private match as well. And one thing I'll tell you we didn't talk about that I know is really important to you is, from the land conservation standpoint, our lands program is very robust. So we do hold conservation easements. A lot of them go to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but we do hold easements as well. But then we'll also buy land, and sometimes it's to, conserve it as far as from a standpoint of restoration efforts and everything. But then a lot of it is for facilitated acquisitions for public hunting.
Yep.
And so just in the last 5 years, just shy of 50,000 acres that we purchased and then are conveying to state, and we convey to state agencies.
For wildlife management areas.
For wildlife management areas, or to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for refuge for hunting. So a lot of public access opportunities. I know that one. That's
willing seller, willing buyer.
That's right.
Yeah. You're buying land that's for sale.
Yep, and it's a facilitated acquisition because a lot of times states, if they want to add it to, if there's a piece of property for sale and they want to add it to their wildlife management area, the refuge, they can't necessarily move as quickly as we can, and the sellers wants to get it sold, so we'll buy it, hold it, and then convey it to the public agency.
That's a really great thing because over the years, I've been made aware a number of times of like Cal will send me something like really great strategic conservation purchases, but it's hard to be that nimble.
It is. It's.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's like for sale, and then you're trying to get some agency to figure it out, and then they got to value it in a way that isn't realistic or whatever.
That's right.
And then so to have people that can identify like a real conservation hotspot and boom, get in there and know how to make deals.
Yep.
And then have the time to then facilitate.
And because we've got great donors, a lot of them are interested in that land conservation and getting it into public hunting access. And so while we're holding it, they'll help with the costs of holding that property before we can convey it. So it's a really it's a great service that we can make sure.
And that's
we get
kind of
more
a
public
sticky
hunting.
thing too. Sometimes with membership, right? Because like we were looking at a really cool project DU was doing in Iowa, and it's like, well, yeah, we're buying the land, and then eventually we're going to turn it over into, I think it was a WMA. But first, we're going to pull out this drain tile. We're going to do some noxious weed work. We're going to really like get it up to
good quality.
Yeah, good quality. And so you're always kind of like balancing out like, yep, we did it, but land management takes time. And, sometimes membership or just the public's like, well, where's the public access? We just bought it. Where is it?
Yeah, or like for example, with Kinisnia, it's a refuge in, or it's going to the Red River National Wildlife Refuge in Louisiana. There's a piece of property, I think it's a little over 3,000 acres, and we've had it for several years, but we haven't been able to convey it to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because they had to get an expansion of the refuge in order to then take it. So that's like a federal thing. You have to go through that. So we've had to hold it for several years before we can convey it to them. So, and it's hard for people to understand.
Can I hunt that place while you're holding it?
Yeah, hunt that place. And so it's not just an overnight sort of thing. And so to have that patience for people to realize that, hey, we might have to have it for a little bit before we're able to convey it is an important note. But it's I think it's an important program, and I think it's something that's really good to be able to do for public hunting access.
I got one last question for you. If God came down and he said, you can either hunt only squirrels or only ducks for the rest of your life, what would you pick?
I'm going to pick ducks.
You just saying that.
I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that. No, I'm saying that. All right, my CEO, Adam Putnam, I love the ducks.
Let it be known that I said ducks.
I said ducks, not squirrels. No, I absolutely love squirrel hunting. It's, and I know it sounds funny, like, how can you be that passionate about squirrel hunting? But
it's the funnest
like,
thing in the world.
It is
man.
a blast. And with dogs, man, you're out there with your dog, but also you can take kids. And that's my son. It was the first thing I did with my son.
You get the bullshit.
Yeah. Squirrel. I mean, you get to sit
you still
and
get
walk.
to talk. Yeah.
You can make as much noise as you want. No one's yelling at you, blowing their duck call just so you'll quit talking, that sort of thing. I mean, it's I don't know, it's just so enjoyable.
Oh,
and
no, man.
it's a big
so
time.
Much good.
But...
we kind of introduced the technology into squirrel hunting. A couple of our friends that do it with dogs, but they were slow to adopt the binocular. Do you bring the binoculars?
I bring binoculars, absolutely.
Yeah, they were like, what? I'm like, man, to finding the squirrel in the tree.
Man, they are so good. So I'll train my dogs to go to the other side of the tree from me.
Spook them around.
So they'll push them around because they will hug on that tree, and then you're trying to go around, and it's going around the tree with you, staying out of sight. Well, I'll get my dog, send it to the other side to chase the squirrel around. So
I hunted bluegrouse, spring bluegrouse with a woman that it's kind of very similar. They're way up in the tree and you're trying to find them in the spring. And she would lay down on her back in the woods. She would kind of it was mostly on hills, steep country. So she'd go up a little ways. So she's more like eye level with the canopy. And she would just lay on her back with binos. And she'd lay there 10 minutes. And also be like, got it. And so when we go out, our friends that had squirrel dogs.
Yeah.
Me and my
they wouldn't take a.
Well, no, but I'd bring binos, and now we would just lay there. And after a while, because my buddy Kevin, he'd always just look through his scope. And after a while, we got a couple of them to give in to the point that binos are not.
Yep.
That binos are helpful for finding those suckers.
They're
but what I was getting
helpful.
at was there's no better feeling.
Yeah.
Than when you're just getting ready to walk away, and all of a sudden someone's like, "Got it."
Yep.
And it's that little tail hair glowing glowing on top of the branch or something. God, that's fun, man.
Moved his ear just enough for someone to catch it.
That's a good time doing that stuff. So you 22 or shotgun?
So most of the time I'll take a shotgun. I do bring a 22 as well, but a lot of the places that I might go and hunt are smaller properties, and so I'm usually taking a shotgun. But if I can get a nice clean shot with a 22, it makes it a lot easier getting that. Getting the shot out of them.
I got to hook you up with my buddy Kevin Murphy to go out with him. He's a big squirrel dog guy.
Yeah, he's in Kentucky.
Yeah, but
I've been out with him.
he calls out. He's got what he calls a war horse. When he rides out, if he's hunting squirrels for real, when he rides out, he's got a 22, a shotgun, a baseball bat, and an axe.
Oh damn!
and
chop down the tree
horn too, right?
So you know Kevin Murphy, Kevin Murphy, West Kentucky.
Oh,
Kevin Murphy.
Small game nation.
That is awesome.
Oh no, that's what I'm talking about with the binos and stuff. He's a woodsman.
Yeah.
One time I was hunting with him,
binos.
and we had a swamp rabbit go into a hole in a tree.
Yeah.
And he goes over and cuts a sawbriar. I'm not kidding you. I've watched this with my own two eyes. Cuts a sawbriar and snakes it up that hole, and he starts twirling it.
Like a plumbing
Pretty
snake.
soon pulls that rabbit back out.
Lots.
Pulls that rabbit back out of the hole. But what he uses that bat for is now and then if there's a squirrel in a hollow, he'll just come up. He'll get the bat off his war horse and go over there and just wallop that tree with a bat and see if it
chases it out. And then the axe is, if all else fails, just cut down the tree.
He just has it with him, He's but yeah, he gets real serious, and he got into riding those horses because he says one time he was just hunting on foot like an idiot, and he sees some guys coming up the road on horses, and he said their saddlebags were just stuffed. He says just squirrel tails hanging out of the saddlebags, and he thought to himself, "I need to get one of those."
Well, yeah, let me tell you, those dogs. They'll go up one mountain, like up one hill, down the other, up another, and then all of a sudden they're striking, and they're like, "Get here and get here now," and you're hoofing it up and down.
Yeah.
So the horse, it's not. I'm one of the idiots on foot, but
Man, you got to hunt with Kevin because you guys be like two peas in a pod.
Yeah. Kevin and I go way back. Machine.
Oh, okay. So
I know Kevin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, known him for years.
Yeah, Butchie Bad Toe. He's got all those famous dogs, and
He has some good squirrel dogs. Some really good squirrel dogs.
All right.
All right.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
It was a lot of fun.
Everybody good?
Enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Yep. No, thanks so much.
Thank you.